鬼より怖き人の世の罪はなき手をそれと消せば.
As the wretched sins of humanity amass and transform to terror. No, that is not a Sweet Baby Inc. reference. This is the Bunraku Theatre Company in conjunction with Capcom in celebration for the launch of Kunitsu-Gami. Is there any LGBT representation in this? No. What about some strict DEI policies? We love them. In the 1700s, in ancient, fictional, yokai-ridden Japan, didn't they look into updating that for a modern audience? Updating the ancient scriptures? I mean this nicely, but can't he just piss off and play some Concord? I am Couch Cube. If you have been following some of my content of late, you know that I'm quite excited about this game. Got it working last night at 12 midnight and got a major chunk played today, up to 10 hours. It has excelled in areas that I wasn't expecting and underperformed in certain sections, but it's a really cool game. It's fresh, it's exactly what I imagined when it came to the art style and gameplay mechanics. So let me introduce you to Kunitsu-Gami. Massive kudos for including a Kami skin, weapon skin, and all of the soundtrack options and switch outs in the fight arenas, in the menus. I'm not sure if this is PC or Game Pass thing because I haven't actually fired this up on the PlayStation 5 yet outside of that demo. Delusional I am with this stuff. You know, Asmongold, he got a character in Dragon's Dogma 2. He's such a massive YouTuber and personality on the landscape that they just stuffed him in there. The Akami thing, I feel, is a nod to my 2 videos I put out on the channel about the PlayStation 5 and that boosted Pro version of the game. It is a PlayStation 2 classic and the nods are everywhere to it, and I'm so thankful to them. Very much doubt Capcom will not and do not ever know who I am. Photo modes. Everybody loves my photo modes. We love our photo modes. No one's listening, mate. You're 240. You get pinned in the comments if you can name the children's cartoon that I sung the photo mode song to. Now, I'm actually quite enjoying this. There's no restrictions on it whatsoever. There's a full pan. You just tap up on the directional button. And this does have some amazing detail and assets, both on the protagonist, but more importantly, that crazy ass yokai that comes through that gate. I kind of never tire at looking at how cool all of these enemies are. It is literally keeping me going, particularly the boss fights. Let's talk briefly about the game's meta, or the combat, or the detail within the sort of day-to-day hack and slash. It actually only has a 1-button process, but you're given a very simple combo guide. There's not as much depth as I'd like to see in the swordplay, but that may change in later game. Kind of seems a little bit fixed. Monster Hunter this ain't, but it more than makes up for it in its delegation aspects and almost RTS placement aspects with who you've got on your team, who you've developed, who you've unlocked, and how you're placing them. There is a guard button, but there is no twangometer to speak of, or any parry mechanics, but you can defend yourself, but at the same time, you have to press a button during guard to get your health back, which can equal some mistaken inputs because the attack button is the same button as your health replenish. But as you can see, it is all about the delegation, who you've got on pitch and where you've placed them. And at the moment, I've only got 4 different NPCs unlocked, including the thief, but it is hinting on the sumo character. And if you know the game, you'll see that there's a wheel that's probably got 16 plus different NPC characters to be placed down within this map. Now there's a lot more focus on preparation than I imagined, so you're looking for orbs to sort of up the amount of money you've got to spend on placing NPC characters, or pumping that into getting that woman further down the path, which we'll get to because it's quite a clever system. But I want to point out there's quite a lot of proactive foraging involved in your starting area. You've got to find out if there's any random orbs or any people that are encased in the defilement, and this is super important. Every NPC you rescue or have on your side is a huge asset for when those doors open, which will be at dusk, which is represented by that mountain over in the corner. So there's a huge amount of time management here, but you can proactively extend time if you feel you've done everything you can and you want to bring that yokai out. This also goes for the ration mechanic. Up on the top right, you'll see the number 8. This is the amount of health packages I can give to the NPCs or myself. And they're found by slaughtering the various mutated wildlife within maps. So it's important that you find them all and you have as many as possible, because you will be giving NPCs health in real time during combat, which is super cool. And another thing is the bosses. So you get these played out corridor cave style levels, but then you'll get an arena boss fight, and that's when you're really tested on your build, i.e. your compilation of party, how many range, how many close quarters you have, do you have any healers. It's a super cool area of the game, and push comes to shove with this particular individual. You can also switch out an NPC player's role in real time if you have the funds. So changing people over from melee to range during a fight is a thing, and it's damn cool. You're looking at around the 5-hour mark for me, and at this point I haven't died in the game yet, and its message is that your deaths are not really of consequence. It is ultimately all about Yoshiru and who has reached her in order to implement damage. The game only ends when she's run out of health, and that is that white health bar you see on screen. There's also a yellow bar, which is a build-up meter on stun. So these enemies can be stunned if you deliver the correct elemental damage at the right time. And that was my first death from health within map. But obviously you respawn, you are a bit of smoke that drifts around and haplessly watches everything unfold until you get a timed respawn. And normally in that time, obviously she's gonna get whacked. This part of the game is one of the more enjoyable for me. They're all individual, these bosses, and they all have a pretty cool reward, and you have to sort of think through the process. One of them coming up is a brick wall, and I think a lot of newcomers to this type of game will get stuck with it. So old Coop's going to step in with some hints. What about sub-bosses and mid-tier enemies? Is there enough of them? Yes, and they're amazing. Some of them buff the other guys, others are like incendiary bombs that just want to make a beeline for the princess. And then you've got all these bigger, larger tank-style creatures, and they all have their health represented. And you can also buff the guys on the fly, depending on what special you have. That feels really good, and having your team around you or having a loadout that you're comfortable with, I sort of go for ratios. With this particular boss, this is the brick wall I'm talking about, what you need is quite a lot of range. The game also falls back on the use of light and seeing weak spots and enemies. This arena is particularly interesting because you've got to allocate an NPC to turn on the lanterns so you can see where to hit this thing. It's no point going for it without light in the arena. So it's a very clever system, and it looks completely gorgeous. This game is not looking as good as it could. This is running at 1080 and medium settings. I do not even have the ray tracing turned on for this luscious, amazing cave level. I would really love some feedback from you PC owners with big rigs, and I am probably going to be putting out a PlayStation 5 review of this because that demo comes with a quality and performance mode. I would say this is middle ground, okay visuals, but 60 frames per second. I think that's important with this game. Every single level and every single boss has a sort of stipulation for requirements for perfect completion. It might be not take any health, not take any damage. I've failed every single one of them. So it is pushing that replay on a lot of these cooler levels, particularly the challenges with the boss fights. I think a lot of people won't bode well with this sort of low level tedium that the game introduces you to within its first hour and a half. But once you start getting cool new NPC helpers unlocked and coming up against some of these amazing bosses, you realize how much this game's got to offer. And I think the difference in NPC helper and developing that wheel and getting cooler stuff on pitch and dealing with larger enemies is the major pull. I generally thought the third-person ARPG combat was going to be a little bit more in-depth than that with the protagonist, but the reward is in your loadout, where you place them, how upgraded you have them. It does not prompt you to go and upgrade your individual units at the hub, so you really need to keep heading back, keep spending the money on them and getting them to do cooler and better things, but more importantly, progress that campaign and open up new and cooler, interesting dudes to have on pitch. It does a couple of cool things on the decision making front with the protagonist and how to end a level. Essentially, that number over on the top right against that pink ball, I pump that into clearing the path for that woman to head down towards the gate. Once she gets to the gate, you need some time for her to do a magic in order for you to eliminate said gate. Now, if you misjudge it and end up with her stationary millimeters from the front of the gate, you'll end up having to deal with all of the horde and she'll be right there taking it all. So you have to make decisions on whether it's worth making that risk or just holding back, reinforcing, waiting for another window on the next wave. None of that makes sense. There are also some sweet spots where she can stop on map where she's buffed and nothing can get to her, or you can catch her at a bad time where she's in front of one of the gates that are helping with the stemming of the flow of these demonic creatures coming through. So there are some decisions to be made during her movement, and there is a stop and start option on her depending on what you want her to do during real-time gameplay. This game was announced and sort of came out of nowhere, and its Okami acknowledgements and its amazing yokai aesthetic, music, performance from everybody within game. I'm talking about the dancing, the singing, the crazy looks, fireworks, all the celebration, how everything's rejuvenated on a Okami level. It's perfect for me. I love it. It's everything I imagined it to be. It's just missing a little bit of depth on that one-to-one combat, but it makes up for it on that amazing resource management / NPC placement mechanic, which I've never really seen before in a game outside of a tower defense. It also makes you start choosing different routes and having the yokai coming in from different gates. I was of course Couch Coop. I will place both Okami reviews in the description. We need a remake of Beautiful Joe 2 that was a local co-op platformer, and I will See you down there.